In this video I'm going to show you a very spectacular game played between Magnus Carlsen and Wesley So. It's titled Tuesday, it's an online game played on chess.com. Time control is only 3 minutes for the game plus 1 second increment per move. And the reason I'm showing you this game is I want you to become a better attacking player. Now in this game, it's a very short game. There are quite a number of instructive thematical things which you can apply in your own games as well. And I think it's of course not only fun to watch the world's best players competing against each other, but it's also really instructive to see how they actually apply simple attacking ideas so that you will also be able to understand what's going on. Well, let's dive straight into the action. And one thing I want to not to forget is if you like my videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate all the overwhelming support, especially also in the last couple of days. Really got some very nice donations via PayPal, so really appreciate all the support, and you can also help to grow the channel even further. So here we go. Magnus Carlsen is playing with the white pieces, and he opens the game with the move 1 e4, e5. And here he plays bishop c4. It is the bishop's opening. Consciously, white decides here not to develop the knight to f3 yet. Well, why he has that in mind we will see later. Knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4, d3, protecting the pawn. Bishop comes out to c5, and here it is the move knight c3. So here white is developing first the queen's knight, keeping the option open to probably go for a quick f2, f4. And black understands that if white's gonna attack on the flank, he needs to strike back in the center. So he played here the move c6, Wesley So. And his idea is that if you do play here the move f4, you can strike back in the center and the center will explode. But that's actually not so bad for black at all. So here Magnus refrained from that move f4, decided to develop the knight to f3 anyway, attacking the pawn on e5. Now the big difference is that black can no longer develop his knight to c6, the ideal square for the knight. So here the pawn on e5 is defended by the move d6. And then perhaps at some point black has ideas to strike with a move like b5, attacking the bishop. So white played here the move a4. Black castled, and so did white. And well, there are different ways of playing. Hard to say what is exactly the best. You can consider developing the bishop or the knight at some point. Moves like a5, they are also quite useful very often. So you can use the b4 square for your bishop or perhaps your knight later. But here, now things are getting really interesting by move 7 already. Wesley So played here this move, rook to e8. And now this is a very standard idea in a lot of positions. It can either prepare the move bishop e6. You can consider rerouting the knight over to the king side, vacating the f8 square. But there's also a clear drawback, and that's the pawn on f7, which is no longer defended. And here, there is this move knight to g5. Magnus hits the pawn with both the bishop and the knight. So black has to deal with this this problem. Now, if you block here with the move d5, this is a mistake, was not played, but I would like to show you why it's not good. Runs into pawn takes, knight takes d5, piece sacrifice with the idea to deflect the knight on f6 from guarding the king side, as after taking that knight, there's queen h5, and white is completely crashing through here with threats against pawns on f7 and h7. So, therefore, instead of playing the move d5, Wesley So played here rook e7, defending the pawn. And where is white's follow-up? White is starting an attack with only the bishop and the knight. And he would love to open up the f-file here with the move f4. But look at that bishop on c5. It is pinning the pawn on f2. And therefore, the move king h1 is played. You understand very clearly what white is aiming for here. He wants to go f4 to attack the pawn on e5 and open up the f-file for the rook to join the attack. Now, understandably, black has to do something, and a good idea here would be to play a move like d5. It was not played by Wesley So, but here everything is under control. With the rook on e7, you're guarding the pawn well, you're attacking the bishop. Looks like very complicated, interesting position, but let's see what happened in the game. There followed the move h6. I think this is a very logical move as well, as black is attacking that knight on g5. And if the knight goes back to f3, well, then white can no longer strike with that move f2, f4. The f-file will remain closed. So what is white going to do here? Well, Magnus knows his classics. This is a very typical attacking idea. You may not have seen it before, but now you are going to learn it, how to play. White goes for the move f4. This is a fantastic piece sacrifice, as white is ignoring the knight on g5. Let's have a look. If you take that knight, was not played in the game, white's going to take back with the f-pawn, attacking the knight on f6, opening up the file for the rook. And let's say if the knight goes to g4, the knight is still nicely defended by the bishop, which means that the queen from d1, it cannot go to h5. But here the key idea is to play g6, and also the pawn can play a very important role in this attack with threats to take on f7. And well, I mean, there are a lot of lines to be analyzed here, but what I would like to show is that black cannot win more material with knight f2. It's a knight fork on the king and queen. If you simply whip off that knight, rook takes f2, bishop takes back, now the queen can join play, and there's nothing black can do against the mating threat on h7, followed by queen h8. So this is completely crushing for white. Now you understand the main ideas behind this piece sacrifice, and black says, well, I'm not going to take the knight yet. Black instead went for the move pawn takes f4, and obviously if you take back with, for instance, the bishop, I mean, you can take the knight, but you can even insert a move like d5, and all the pieces are hanging, and it feels like black is in good shape. So instead of taking back the pawn on f4, Magnus Carlsen came up with very important idea here. He decided now to sacrifice the knight on f7. Knight takes pawn, rook takes, and very important, before you do something, you have to reckon with black's defensive response d6, d5, when the bishop will no longer be able to take the rook. So white takes with the bishop on f7. Now it's king takes. Now this is a typical sacrifice, or it's not even a sacrifice, it's like position with two minor pieces for the rook. And usually if the side with the two minor pieces is able to get his minor pieces into the game, should be quite good news. But at this point, especially that knight on b8, the bishop on c8 there on their initial square, also the rook on a8 is still out of place. So what white needs to do here is to open up the position, trying to put pressure on black and try to be faster than his opponent. Well, rather than taking the pawn on f4, first it's d3, d4, attacking the bishop. Key move. The bishop goes away, and now Magnus goes for the move bishop takes f4. Very active player with ideas also to, for instance, play a move like e4, e5 to put pressure on that knight on f6. Look at that rook on f1. It's eyeing the king on f7. So things are looking quite dangerous here for black if white is able to get in that move e4, e5. Now, I think a typical idea is to try to place your king on a safer square. King g8, that's the safe spot for the king. The question is how to do it. I think you can do it right away, but Wesley So decided to first take with the bishop on c3. Now after pawn takes c3, the king goes back to g8. And well, there are some problems. In general, it's very nice to have the bishop on the board. Now the bishop is gone for black. There are some clear targets, as at this point white would love to play a move like e5 to attack the knight, but black can try to strike back here with bishop g4, and for that reason, instead of e5, you first put your queen on f3. Look at this position. If you get this in the blitz game, there's not much time on the clock. You see the attacking prospects for white here. The rooks are connected, they're teaming up together with the queen and the bishop, and their idea is to go e5 or maybe even sacrifice sometimes on h6 the bishop so that you can hit the knight on f6. This looks incredibly dangerous for black, but black is doing sort of okay here still if he puts the bishop on e6. Why is this such a good move? Well, the bishop is not vulnerable, and there are ideas to get a knight very quickly into the defense. And even if you play something like bishop takes h6, don't take on h6, it runs into queen takes, and even when the queens are coming off the board, the entire 6th rank is really vulnerable, and white's rooks, they're dominating the position. But instead, after bishop takes h6. As I said, black can ignore the bishop with a move like knight bd7, and that's what you have to do in chess. It's not about material, it's about getting all your pieces into the game. Well, instead of bishop e6, Wesley So played here the move bishop g4, and this is such a natural move. You put a bishop on a square where it hits the queen, so you develop the bishop with gain of time. But the problem is that after queen g3, there are still very serious problems because the bishop is relying on the support of the knight. So what white would love to do here next is play the move e4, e5 to attack that knight. And if the knight moves, then the bishop will be hanging as well. Now, both players, they must have been calculating here like machines. They follow the move bishop e2. That's a remarkable move, guys, because the bishop is hitting the rook. And obviously, if the rook is careless and it goes to f2, attacking the bishop on e2, there is knight takes e4. With a knight fork, black is actually winning the game here. So what else can be done? Well, if you put the rook on e1, there's another problem. There's knight h5. And there's an attack on the bishop and the queen, and well, black is gonna survive a potential attack. So let's go back. This is a critical moment. After bishop e2, what did Magnus Carlsen have in mind? He ignored the threat. Just play bishop takes pawn. The pawn on g7 is pinned. White is threatening mate in 1. If you take on f1, it's queen takes g7 with checkmate. So black gotta do something about that threat. Queen e7 was played. And only now the move rook f2 e1 on the board, attacking the bishop. And well, if the bishop goes somewhere, once again there's this move e4, e5 with huge threats against the knight on f6, against the queen. So this is something black is not going to enjoy at all. So instead of moving the bishop away, Wesley So played knight takes e4, attacking the queen on g3. You cannot take on e2 with the idea to exploit the pin on the e-file. There's knight takes g3 with check. No time to take the queen on e7. So instead of rook takes e2, Magnus played a much better move. He just solves the first problem. Queen to g6, maintaining the threat along the g-file. So the queen cannot really move, has to keep the pawn on g7 defended. Now the rook is attacking the bishop on e2. And well, if the bishop moves, there's also the idea to take the knight on e4, as both the queen and rook are attacking that piece. So black decided here to play knight takes c3. And that's an interesting concept because the knight is protecting the bishop, while the bishop is also covering both the d1 and the f1 square. So it's not that easy to get more pieces involved into the attack. Well, Magnus, as always, has a creative solution for these sort of problems, as the rook will be developed along the third rank, rook a3. In fact, a very simple, nice, strong move, attacking the knight on c3. The knight has to go away. It cannot count on the support of any of the other pieces, so it goes to e4. But then there is simply the move rook takes e2, and well, that move would have been played after any other move as well. So imagine you would have placed the knight on d5. There's also rook takes e2, because if you take with the queen on e2, it's queen takes g7 with checkmate once again. So let's have a look. Knight takes e4, knight e4 played, rook takes e2. And black tries to consolidate the position here with the move d6, d5, cementing that knight in the center. But you are just an exchange down. Now, if black would have some time, let's say you could go knight d7, rook f8, threatening mate on f1, maybe even rook f6 to attack the queen on g6 and bishop on h6. Well, things are still sort of playable, but you should not rest here. It's time to keep the attack going. Amazing move here now by Magnus once again. Rook to g3. He's placing the rook on the square where it can just be captured. But if you take with a knight on g3 with check, it's pawn takes g3 and the e-file has been opened now. The rook is attacking the queen. If the queen takes on e2, we have seen already the checkmating pattern on g7. If the queen goes away, let's say to f7, then you can play a rook e8, and after queen takes e8, rather than taking the queen, you just give checkmate on g7, of course. So, amazing idea, rook g3, and with the rook on g3, you are threatening to take the pawn on g7. Knight was developed to a6, queen takes g7, Queens are coming off the board. You take back with the rook with check. King goes into the corner. And now after rook takes b7, well, it's maybe not a mating attack anymore. Probably it can also lead to mate. I'm not sure what's going on. But for sure, position is absolutely hopeless. Like white is up, an exchange, and 2 pawns, better pieces. This is something you're not going to play on against Magnus Carlsen. So, very nice game at this point. Wesley So resigned. But I think this idea in the opening with that knight sacrifice on f7 starting with this move f4, I think that's an idea worth remembering, because you see how quickly not only the pieces which are already colored in green, they are already nicely placed, but also very soon after the other pieces joined the attack as well. So I thought this was very nice, impressive attacking game by Magnus Carlsen. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? And of course, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for the overwhelming support, and I'll see you soon again, guys. Bye bye.